the past 2 nights, you've seen what could have been peaceful protests turn into violent destruction. That is why this morning, joined by members of the City Council, Chief of Police and Chief of Fire, we come to you with a heavy heart. We are all disappointed. And we feel the pain that is being felt throughout this country for the last few nights. What we know, as we stand here, the violence and destruction, the images we've seen across this city, is not the Richmond we know. It's not the Richmond we know. We saw local businesses, some black-owned businesses that have served Richmond for decades, vandalized and looted. We've seen people's homes on fire. Bricks have flown through the windows of synagogue. We've seen buildings vandalized throughout the city. Spray paint. Ladies and gentlemen, I think it's time to say that enough is enough, and this must stop. This must end. We cannot sit here idly and agree and tell everyone here that these actions are productive, because they're not. When you block law enforcement from allowing fire services to get to a home, an occupied home that's caught on fire, you are not inspiring change. When you knock out windows in businesses that had nothing to do with this, you are not inspiring change. That's an insult to the cause, right? That's an insult to the cause. We all know what happened in Minneapolis. Those actions are an insult to the cause. It's an insult to black men, black women who suffer every day at the hands of structural racism in this nation. At this point, these bad actors are hijacking the cause. As I said, peaceful protest in solidarity against the injustices of black men, hijacked by bad actors. As soon as you loot a store or set a public bus on fire, you've stopped protesting. You're not demonstrating. You've made it about you when it should be about us. Taking advantage of our pain, making a mockery of George Floyd's death, using our frustration, our anger, and our heartbreak to create chaos. Bottom line, it's wrong. It's wrong. ladies and gentlemen, let me be frank. People coming into our city and vandalizing some legacy black businesses, businesses in general, public transportation that people here in the city rely on, under the guise of police accountability, that's not progress for Black America. That's not progress for this city. So don't kid yourself. That's not progress. That's not protest. That's not certainly not the justice that we seek for George Floyd. Last night, 4 officers, a few firefighters as well, ended up injured. And we have one man suffering a life-threatening gunshot wound while he was in his car on the streets of the city of Richmond. It's wrong. And I think it's easy to say that we cannot go on like this. This is not us. This is not us. This is the antithesis to the solutions that we seek. So after 2 nights of violence and destruction, we're taking steps to continue to promote peaceful, lawful, and safe demonstration and protect both people and property. Now, I'm grateful for the Richmond Police Department, the Fire Department, the Richmond Ambulance Authority for their crucial work during this time. They've served with courage, and with patience over the last 48 hours. But they need additional support. And to support these efforts, I've been in conversation since early this morning, I guess you could say, with Governor Northam. And I've requested the assistance of the National Guard to be available if needed. And the governor has indicated they are ready to step in if Richmond needs that support and assistance. I've also asked the governor to declare a curfew in the city of Richmond tonight, starting tonight. Starting tonight, Sunday, May 31st at 8 p.m., and he has granted that request. The curfew will roll from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. The curfew shall apply to the occupation of public spaces within the Richmond city limits, and it will be enforced. It will be enforced. Simple to say that law enforcement, medical workers, those who are part of those categories of occupations will obviously be exempted from the order. The governor has continued to work on that and will be releasing details. But the bottom line, people may only be out in public within city limits to go back and forth to work, seek medical attention, or assistance from first responders. And let's not forget that we are still in the middle of a global pandemic. Let's not forget that. And that is taking a disproportionate toll on the Black and brown communities that reside right here in the city of Richmond. As we've been talking about for the last 10 to 11 weeks, public safety and public health will be this city's main and #1 priority, and it remains such today. So here's the deal. I'm not asking people who come to this city or people who reside in this city not to exercise their First Amendment rights. That's not our request today. I'm simply asking you to remember that this disease continues to kill the black community at the highest rates. We need to still take care when we are in these spaces. You know, the truth is, the pain that our community is feeling, the anger and mourning that crowds have come to Richmond streets, it's visceral, it's real. The pain is real, and it is compounded over time. Each and every one of us feels that pain. And if you're part of the black community, you have felt that pain in a disproportionate way for a very, very long time. Very long time. But many of the individuals who felt that pain, they are the ones who have been peacefully demonstrating. Peacefully demonstrating. And there are others who chose to channel that pain into destruction and into violence. Ladies and gentlemen, that is not how we get the results that we want as a community. That is not how we get the results as we want as a people. That is not who we are. Not who we are. If you desire the same results, the positive results that will allow to lift black people up, we ask that you come to the table peacefully. Not knocking windows and light fire to homes. There's a process for that. And I get it. Some have felt excluded from that process for a very long time. But we are all here today to say we welcome you to the table. We welcome you to the process. But violence and destruction, that is not the way. And that will not be allowed any further in the city of Richmond. With that, I'm going to ask Chief Will Smith to address the public over about the incidents of the last 48 hours. Chief Smith.
First of all, good morning. I want to begin my statement by reiterating my anger over the death of George Floyd. It has stricken all of us to the core. The actions that we've seen in Minneapolis, the policies that we see in Minneapolis, the response that we see in Minneapolis. And for us, the way that we honor his death is to make sure that our police department is a reflection of what this community wants to see. That means in terms of its policies, how we respect people, and how we interact with people of all color, all creeds, all desires. So I want to begin by just focusing on that loss. I also want to commend all of our public safety partners. Their dedication and professionalism has shown through very, very difficult times. We have maintained high professionalism and respect to everybody we've dealt with over the past 2 days. This has been a team approach. It includes Richmond Police, Richmond Fire, Richmond Ambulance, Emergency Communications, Henrico Police, Henrico Fire, Chesterfield Police, Virginia State Police, Virginia Capitol Police, Virginia Commonwealth University Police, and I am truly grateful for their support. I want our citizens to know that we're doing our very best to provide life safety to all of our citizens throughout these challenging times. While we can replace vehicles, we can rebuild businesses, we can rebuild homes, we shouldn't have to. But what we can't replace are lives, and lives are the most important things that we safeguard. As the mayor mentioned, we've had a lot of violence that has occurred. Many of the people that have been injured due to protester on protester violence. And I want to reiterate that again, protester on protester violence. The man shot last night was shot by a protester. We've had a number of people that have been injured by thrown bottles, rocks, bricks, everything that you can imagine, thrown by other protesters. As the mayor said, our protests have started out peacefully every single night with respectful people voicing their legitimate concerns. We've been able to facilitate them in their First Amendment rights, but it hasn't taken too long each night before actors that I'll go into in just a few minutes have taken over the protest and have changed the tone. We've noticed on many occasions that those that started out amongst the peaceful protests, once it turns violent, they are immediately leaving the area, but oftentimes still being assaulted and battered. And again, there's one incident I think is particularly poignant that truly illustrates the seriousness of the issues that we're facing. The mayor mentioned this. Last night, protesters intentionally set a fire to an occupied building on Broad Street. This was not the only occupied building that has been set fire to over the last 2 days, but they prohibited us from getting on scene. We had to force our way to make a clear path for the fire department. Protesters intercepted that fire apparatus several blocks away with vehicles and blocked that fire department's access to the structure fire. Inside that home was a child. Officers were able to help those people out of the house. We were able to get the fire department there safely. Sorry. But when you take a legitimate issue and hijack it for unknown reasons, that is unacceptable to me, it's unacceptable to the Richmond Police Department, unacceptable to the city of Richmond. As the mayor said, this isn't Richmond. And it truly is not Richmond. It's not even Virginia. It's not even the Mid-Atlantic. We have intelligence that we're working on presently so that we hope to be able to file charges following up from this. We have people from across the country who have traveled many states to be here. We know that this is an organized effort. We're committed to try and identify those that are behind it, and we're doing our very level best to arrest those that are perpetrating the violence on our community, our city, and our citizens. So, with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, we'll take a couple questions.
Brent.
Can we get more details from the fire department about what that situation was with the child inside and what happened? Just the details surrounding it.
Chief Carter.
Good morning, everyone. As Chief Smith alluded to earlier, the fire department was dispatched to a occupied dwelling in a multi-family structure. We were delayed by protesters who were blocking our egress to the property, and as Chief Smith also alluded to, if it had not been for his personnel who were able to provide access to the property as well as to remove the occupants of the dwelling, the outcome could have been far more tragic than just the building and the contents itself. There were no firefighting injuries in that particular incident, but there have been other incidents where fires have been started in multiple occupied dwellings. Whether it's directly the structure itself or a dumpster or debris that's been set on fire against buildings that are occupied. So We have been able to address them as they have occurred, but it's a trend that we do not want to see continue.
Do you recall where that home was?
The 300 block of West Broad Street.
And what time was that?
It was early this morning, I don't know the specific time.
We can get that detail.
Overnight hours.
Yes.
Justin?
Chief Smith from here told me that about these outside actors, do you have any more intelligence as to where exactly they're coming from and when they arrived, and have they taken part in open into the protest or just one?
No, it's clear from their tactics that they're taking part, that they are infiltrating other protests to hide themselves and then use that as a jumping off point for their actions. You know, Friday night's protest was a much larger crowd, and it was a much larger crowd of peaceful people, our own citizens coming out and voicing their displeasure. We didn't have any trouble at all whatsoever for first several hours, and then it turned. And as soon as it turned, our citizens and our communities left the area very quickly, and this more organized group was active until about 6:00 a.m. on Saturday morning. Last night, total crowd at the beginning was relatively small. I think based on the actions of Friday night, that people were a little bit more hesitant to be involved. And again, it started out peacefully. A lot of people chanting and having a positive message. But it turned very quickly last night. It was very rapid ramp up. I'll say this also, on Friday night, we had people in the crowd trying to keep others from being involved in violence. So,
Chief, do you believe many of these outside actors are not even involved in this protest? They're just committed to violence and destruction?
yeah, I mean, I think that's clear when you look at the things that they're targeting. Certainly I think when we see what was hit last night along Monument Avenue, I think we can all understand attacking the symbols of the past and of a racist past. But when you look at trying to burn down a VCU dormitory, or burn down people's homes, or burn down and loot the stores that we depend on every day, those things don't correlate at all. So, I think there is a much more organized effort, and we're doing our very best to determine where that's coming from and who's pulling the strings.
Can you tell us at all what groups you've associated with these folks?
We do have anti-fascists, we have some anarchists to a large degree, but there's people from outside of this state and outside of this area that we know that are involved, and we're doing our best to identify them and backtracking what their affiliations are.
Gabrielle?
This is for Chief Smith. First, I want to say thank you for your vulnerability during this time.
I'm pretty tired too, so sorry.
My question to you, you mentioned the different policies that you have placed here as far as policing in Richmond. 2 years ago, there was a man that was shot and killed, had a mental episode, Marcus Peters. People are wanting to know about the Marcus alert as well as a civilian accountability task force. Wanting to know how you all are moving forward and making sure incidents like that do not happen.
Yes, ma'am, that's a great question. We across the board, we assess everything that we do and try and learn as much as we can from that. When it comes to an idea of a Marcus alert or a crisis alert, we're working diligently on that and have been for several months. We plan to meet with the family and have their input in that. We want to make sure that they have input into what we have planned, so that we make sure that we reflect the needs that we know the community has. When we look at training processes, we have a program that was implemented that we developed here in Richmond, an active response training, which goes to our group accountability for individual behavior. So I think what happened in Minneapolis is a great example of that. You have several officers that had every opportunity to intervene for a long period of time. I demand my officers to intervene at the very first chance that we see any of our coworkers losing their temper or losing their cool. That's what we expect, and that's what we do. So we're going through that training. We put a number of people through the training last year. We're going to continue to do that. Also, as a part of that particular incident, we were committed to making sure that 100% of our workforce is crisis intervention certified and trained. By the end of this year, we will be 100%. We're at about, I'm sorry I don't have the number right off the top of my head, we're probably 90%. We have about 3 classes left to go, so we're about 60 people that remain that are primarily in administrative positions. Again, we're looking at increasing the number of civilians that we have on our review boards. We do review boards, we have civilians on our review boards, and we would welcome more civilians on our review boards. We consider that a great partnership, and I ask today, if you wish to serve on a review board that reviews all of our actions, whether it's accidents, use of force, please reach out to the Richmond Police Department, and we will be glad to include you in those processes.
8 News.
I have a question for Mayor Smith.
Next question.
8 News.
Mayor Stoney,
In this shit right there.
my name is Rachel
All
Keller.
women
with
sidewalls, you go sidewalls and discharge
Many of
release
these
all women.
riders are heartbroken, outraged, angry, upset. What is your direct message to them?
I'm sorry, I can't hear. Can you repeat that question again?
Yes, many of these riders are heartbroken, upset, angry, outraged. What is your message to them?
Yeah,
You know, we share that pain, that heartbreak that many of our protesters feel. As I stated yesterday, as a black man, I've had encounters with law enforcement before. People in my family have had encounters with law enforcement before. That we know, looking back at it now, those encounters could have gone better. No one is immune from that. No black person is immune from that. And so it is painful. And as I said earlier, it's compounded pain, right? It's compounded pain. Because once you have a traumatic incident like that, it sticks with you, right? Before I was ever in public service, there were moments where a cop car got behind me, my heart raced. My blood pressure went up. Why is that? Why is that? That should not be the experience shared amongst black men. Shouldn't. That fear is what we saw when there was a knee on George Floyd's neck. That's the pain, that's the suffering right there. And then time and time and time again, the same images. That's the pain that is being unleashed right now. As I stated earlier, we welcome folks to express that pain by exercising their First Amendment rights. Right? But we ask that you do it peacefully. Because we believe that there's no change that can come from violence. Exercising essentially an injustice on the city by vandalizing, by acts of destruction. Two wrongs don't make a right. The injustice in Minneapolis with a knee on a man's neck, and violence and destruction in the streets of the city of Richmond. Both those wrongs don't make a right. We all know that we are better people than them. And my request is those who've chosen a different path that has not been peaceful to rise to the occasion of the peaceful Richmonders who've been expressing that pain.
Last question, Brent?
Mayor, we saw some challenges in other cities when there was a curfew. It led to more attention when it came to enforcement. What's the expectation going in, and how do we kind of fight that fine line? With excessive force being the allegation of enforcement.
I think Chief Smith has stated earlier that, we have done our, we've done a good job in practicing restraint over the last 48 hours. But the curfew is necessary because there are some bad actors who are just not complying at all, right? I don't rush to paint a broad brush of those who've shown up in our streets over the last 48 hours, right? Many of them have come there to protest and demonstrate peacefully. And I expect that will remain. There are events on the calendar today and tomorrow that I expect that will be peaceful. However, we are responsible for the safety of life and property in this city. And we will protect such. And the chief, alongside our partners, will ensure that we do that. We recognize that there has been issues in other places, but that's why we come prepared. And they will be prepared to respond appropriately, accordingly.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate you guys.
Thank you, guys.